as cap.
Who we got coming in? Alrighty, 7:15. Good morning, everybody. Welcome to number 9, Talk Tuesday, and on to zones 1 and 5 this week. We are doing, obviously, the bottom end and the top end together, and you'll understand why as we go through the presentation. One needs the other, and vice versa. So, as always, if you have questions as we're going through, please just put them into the chat or wait till the end and we'll give you time to ask them and we'll take time to answer. We have a presentation. Hopefully this week works. Are we all seeing that? Let me figure out what's going on here. So we have zone 5s, and 1 to 5, which we're calling sleeping to leaping. Basically, zone 1 is your bottom, complete at rest or just above. Zone 5 is your maximal effort. For some reason, my laptop's not liking me doing that. Let me just figure something out. Sorry, it's not liking me sharing. Anyone wants to give me a lesson in Keynote, you're more than welcome. Okay. Can you see that next slide or not?
Still on your first one.
Awesome. Don't know why when I go full screen, it stops me being able to share the slide. Figure out why.
Don't you love tech?
I don't know why it worked last week and then this week it gives me full problem. All right, go plan B. Rob Jones, your lovely highlighted work isn't going to work. I'm sorry.
Don't know why I bother.
I don't know why it works one week and not the other for me. All right, let's get on with it. So the differences between zones, as we've done each week, we can see zone 1 is way down in terms of heart rate for swimming, and it's very easy in terms of pace. Same story for your bike and your run. It's well below 81 and 85% of your threshold heart rates. It is nearly half of your functional threshold power and 78% or less of your lactate threshold pace. Some words you might see when we want you to be going in zone 1 in your training is recovery, easy, chilled, cruisy, float, or shakeout runs. And it is really an oxygen dominant fuel, so your oxygen aerobic system is being used. We often will give you just the parameter to stay below when you're in zone 1. We don't give you the bottom to top. It's just basically a threshold or under that threshold being your zone 1 into 2 threshold. And that similar story with zone 5 is we'll often give you the bottom threshold of zone 5 to just make sure that you're over and not a range. So we'll probably never give you a max number to hit for a few reasons, but mainly because we actually don't know what that could be. It can change, and you need a very, very accurate way of measuring it to give that. So as long as we know you're above a certain number, then we know that you're going to be getting to zone 5. What you'll see again in your training peaks is words like hard effort, maximum, full gas, all in, balls to the wall. It's rarely you're looking at data. You normally look at data after the session. While you're doing it, it should be focused on more of an effort more than anything else. And this is using your ATP PC system, which requires no oxygen, and it's like a firework going off. It shoots off and then it quickly burns out. So it's pretty cool for 1 to 5 seconds, and then it's gone. And what you're looking for if you're building in zone 5 is just creating more fireworks. You can't make the firework go on for longer, but you can have more. So there's the 2 zones and the differences. When we're looking at this, so the first question is what adaptations happen around zone 5? And is it relevant to triathlon? I'll answer both, but looking at adaptations around zone 5 is pretty interesting. This was all meant to come up in a nice order, obviously not working. I obviously know that we know the adaptations are there. I wanted to make it as relevant to you guys as a population as I could. So I found a study that looked at around, it wasn't very big, it was around 12 athletes who were training on average around 4 hours a week. So probably actually a bit less than what most of you are doing. And they put a study together that compared 12 athletes doing just 4 hours of endurance training per week, or what they call continuous training. And then they looked at 12 athletes, these are the triathletes, to replace some of that time within the 4 hours with some high intensity interval training. I'll tell you what that protocol was towards the end of this slide, because it's very interesting in what the protocol was for the benefit that they got. But what you get in terms of adaptations is a motor unit recruitment. So that means you can fire a muscle, and there are neurons going into that muscle, and basically each muscle has that neuron. And what you can do with high intensity, so we're talking zone 5 training, but also known as high intensity interval training, is you can put more neurons into that muscle and make it fire harder. And also you can recruit more muscle fibers within that muscle to fire harder as well. So you're getting way more of a recruitment of muscle fiber in just 4 weeks. So a 6% difference over 4 weeks is pretty big. It's definitely significant. So we're getting that as a number 1. Improved glycolytic function essentially comes because you're using up the top system, so the ATP-PC system, and so your sensitivity to the next system, which is your glycolytic function system, is higher. So you basically can tap into that faster, and your body is more sensitive to use it faster, essentially. So you're getting an improved function there. The most significant adaptation that they see within this study was improved buffering capacity. So that means that the waste products used from the waste product from the ATP-PC system is being buffered. So the lactic acid that we talked about last week, and that buffering capacity that we learn our bodies do in zone 4 also happens when training for zone 5, so that high intensity work. And I think the theory around that is you have to go through and come back down through zone 4 when doing high intensity interval training. So you get exposure to this level where you are getting better at buffering lactate and clearing hydrogen ions, so H+ hydrogen. That is all part of going up into the maximal effort zone and coming back down. So you're getting some little side effects from the high intensity interval work that might not necessarily be applicable purely to zone 5, but because of zone 4's function and going in and out of it as you're going up into zone 5, we get we see a huge buffering capacity there, which is the biggest difference that we see in the results of this study. They also found that hard work can feel less hard, so your RPE reduction takes place, and that's basically because, you know, when you run a really hard race, you're not scared to run another really hard race because you've already been through one really hard one, essentially. That's quite interesting because that's more of a mindset change that you can get from training in high intensities. And then all this results in a work increase. All of these adaptations come from a different part of zone 5. So you might have seen before, you get zone 5 A, B, and C. What this refers to is the intensity within that zone. So C comes down to 1 to 5 seconds, B comes down to around 30 to 40 seconds, and A is around 2 to 3 minutes. It's not actually that clear in between what's going on, but if you're stronger, if you have a more of a fast twitch fiber makeup, then your C will likely be a little bit larger, and then that drags on it obviously into B and A. So an example like this would be if you're training zone 5C, then you might see a faster increase in motor unit recruitment. So that's very fast, extremely short efforts. Around A and B is where you're going to get this really important physiological adaptation in terms of glycolytic function and using waste products to use as fuel again and clearing out the hydrogen ions, which is what causes that, what people know as lactic acid burn. And then being able to tolerate really hard efforts is what essentially gives you that RPE reduction, which gives us that work increase. If we have a look over here, we can see a pre and post results from the study that happened over 4 weeks. The control group, who just continued to do 4 hours of training a week, didn't get any better in terms of time to onset of blood lactate. So OBLA is onset to blood lactate. They had the same time to reach the lactate threshold as they did before they did their training intervention, which you'd expect. The guys who had high intensity interval training put into their plan, you can see, took significantly, I think it was about 4% greater time to onset of blood lactate. Now, they didn't actually say this was significant. That is down to how they do stats within the study. Essentially, it could mean that one person, you can see the standard deviation line, 1 to 2 people may have failed, may not have shown up for the retest, something like that. So they can't call it significant. However, you can see that it is 4%. I definitely would take 4% improved increase in time to blood lactate. So if you follow the training plan and assume that they showed up for the test, then that would happen. And you can see the top guy has gone nearly up by almost 100 seconds improvement, which is very good. This shows us the control group's blood lactate concentration. So they essentially didn't get any better in terms of being able to buffer lactate and reaching. We know that they didn't get any more time to reach that lactate onset, whereas this is the high intensity group. So you can see that they post took longer to reach their blood lactate onset and overall was lower as well. So that was before and that is after. So again, a nice big difference there. Now, I said I'd wait to tell you what the protocol was until the end. You might be surprised to hear that this all happened with just 6, well, the protocol was 10 times 6 seconds maximal effort sprint training, 2 to 3 times per week. And they had a minute's rest in between. So that is around 2 to 3 minutes of time spent in zone 5 each week for 4 weeks that caused all these adaptations, or in theory caused all these adaptations. And that is what we really want to get across to you in this presentation this week, is while zone 5 outcomes might look incredible, more is not always better. But maximal intent is the real point of focus when doing zone 5 work. And that's shown if you can do just 6 seconds of all-in training with a minute recovery times 10, that gives us an incredible benefit and is all you need to make a difference. Next up for a question, which is Rob Jones. Is a zone 1 run better than doing nothing if I'm feeling tired?
It's me. Yeah. Cool. And my fancy things don't work.
Sorry, mate.
Okay, so zone 1, is it better to do a zone 1 run, or, well, basically, is it better to run or not to run? That is the question. So think about your stress levels. If your stress levels, whether they're physical or psychological, are higher than they should be on your easy days, your body is not going to be able to recover from your hard sessions. If your stress keeps piling up without adequate recovery, then your body's going to break down through fatigue, and probably then eventually over time you're going to get injured. Train too hard too often, you neglect your aerobic base, and that's going to be essential for you to reach your performance potential for all distances, short distance, trail, triathlon, whatever it might be. So to run fast when it really, really counts, you've got to be comfortable running slowly. We know this. We know this is the 80% aerobic bit, the aerobic rule. So you need to be more comfortable to run much, much easier. If you think about what the body does, it sends stress signals in a lot of different ways. Injury, insomnia, changes in your mood, you feel worn down, you might not be able to hit the target paces that you want. And these are all signals that you should be spending time running slower or even not running at all and resting. The way to think about rest, if you think about running, it causes breakdown all the way from a cellular level right to your physiological systems. So it involves muscles, it involves organs, even the brain. So if you train hard more than a few days in a row and you're not recovering, your performance is going to fall off a cliff. Your training is actually going to become counterproductive. Overtraining, overuse, injuries going to be the result. But if you have enough and adequate rest and recovery, your body's going to adapt to these minor breakdowns. It's going to come back stronger, and that's what's going to lead to you making those gains in your running. Effectively, if you recover smart, you're going to be like a real life Forrest Gump, but in much, much shorter shorts. Really, that's what we're looking for. Impact forces, they increase breakdown, and so if you so the impact forces increase breakdown and then decrease the total amount of work that you can do before you get injured. So impact forces are ultimately the reason why rest days are important for most runners. And most impact related injuries, they develop over time. They don't just occur straight away. Most. Obviously, once they reach a tipping point, they're gonna manifest themselves quickly, and you're gonna spend a lot of time at the physio. But rest days, if you use them strategically in your training cycle, they can put a stop to injuries before you even know they exist. Now, think about recovery runs. They can accelerate the recovery process by increasing blood flow. They also have a little bit of an aerobic benefit. And they can actually be quite fast. If you're following the guidelines that Tom set out there, you might be running it, depending on your fitness level, marathon pace, or maybe even just below marathon pace. So they still could be quite quick to still be a recovery run. So yeah, they're not necessarily slow. Although whilst most recovery runs are positive, they still involve impact forces. You're still going to get stressed bones, stressed joints, stressed tendons, stressed ligaments, and even the slowest recovery run that you do can, if you have a stress fracture, it's going to exacerbate it. So while rest days, from a pure performance perspective, they might be worse. Is it worse than getting injured, or any gains that you might gain from a recovery run, they're not really going to impact you if you're going to be injured for weeks and months. Instead, what can you do? You can obviously, instead of running, you can walk, you can foam roll, you could do strength work, you could do mobility, you could jump on the bike and do a light spin session, or even slightly harder spin session, but you're avoiding the impact forces. So don't try and do things like CrossFit, tennis, jumping up and down, anything that involves impact. I went for an analogy here. Tom Walker's gone with a firework for zone 5. I'm going to go for the whole training analogy. Think of training. I'm going to read this out because I've written this one down. Think of training like a big salad with time in your aerobic zone as the greens. That's the bulk of your training. When you get closer to lactate threshold, this is the dressing. And above lactate threshold, your zone 5, this is the chicken. And a salad with just greens isn't going to get a 5-star delivery review. Likewise, a cup of dressing and chicken might taste okay, but it's not a well-balanced meal. You've just got to ensure that all your training is well-balanced. You listen to your body, you're smart, and you will succeed.
I've never heard that analogy, mate, but it's going to be world famous from now on, I think.
Should have kept it for the podcast.
I'm glad you didn't. Cool. Next question is, when doing technical OCR training mixed with short runs in between, should I be concerned with heart rate zones? OCR man, George Crew.
Okay, guys. So, just like what Tom said, when you're training zone 5, it basically should be done by effort. So if you've got time to look down at your watch and check your heart rate zone, then you definitely are not in zone 5. So if you've got time to look down and see if you're in zone 5, then you're not going hard enough, okay? So, and like what Rob just said with regards to recovery, again, that should be done by feel. You can do things like take the stress off your joints by doing recovery spins and things. However, with OCR, so with regards to zone 5, you're never really going to go into zone 5, except when you come up obstacles similar to this one that you can see on the screen. So something like a stupidly heavy tire carry, your heart rate may drop into zone 5 when you try and pick up a heavy tire. Like you can see this guy on the screen, he's actually one of these Spartan Pro athletes. So he may have just tipped into zone 5. I know that I normally would on a tire carry, but it's not something I would check. I would highly advise those who are doing obstacle racing that basically you are better to train more as a race simulation minded. So exactly what we do in our Thursday classes at the gym, we would do short runs. They would be more zone 4, which is what we spoke about last week. But then you may dip into zone 5 when you're doing the obstacles. That's about it. Tom, if you go next. So you can probably see from my face here, this is when I was in Bahrain. I was probably in zone 5 here. I actually tried to figure this out in Training Peaks to see if I was at where my heart rate was on this barbed wire crawl. But because you're basically moving your whole body, it's like a really fast bear crawl. But as we all know, bear crawls are disgusting. So you've gone from zone 5, super hard running, and then you're down on your ground, on your chest, and you're crawling under barbed wire. Your heart rate shoots up. So you may creep into zone 5 there. And then Tom, if you go next again. Okay, so OCR World Champs actually introduced something a couple of years ago, which is the 100-meter sprint, OCR World Championship 100-meter sprint. Now this is the only sprint obstacle race that there is, and it's only a World Championship event, and I think you have to qualify to even get in. So unless you are training for that, and I don't know anyone that's even been and done it, then really zone 5 training, loads of it, you really don't want to be doing it. Obviously, if this is your main focus, and you want to try and win the 100-meter OCR World Champ sprint, then obviously you do a bit more zone 5 training. This is super cool. I think it's a 100-meter sprint with 10 obstacles. So obviously, like I just said before, you want to be, when you're going on hard obstacles, you're going to be jumping into zone 5. So this is something that would probably be a key in loads of zone 4 training, loads of zone 5 training. But if you go on to the next slide, Tom, with all that zone 4 and zone 5 training, it's super important, like Rob said, is to recover. So, and guys, don't be scared to take a complete day off as well. So when you've done zone 5 training, your body's under so much stress, well, it should be if you're doing it correctly, then you need to take the easy days. So yeah, I always go out for an easy ride, super easy and less stress on the joints. But if you need to take a complete day off and just do some foam rolling at home, then that would be much more beneficial than going out, doing another zone 1 session. Like Rob just said, it's still going to stress the body to a certain extent. And if the body's already under a certain amount of stress from the zone 5 training, then there's no point in going out for a zone 1, because all you're going to do is stress the body even more. So take the complete day off and focus on other areas way more, like better nutrition, loads of water, hydration, and some foam rolling, and maybe some stretching and some yoga. So yeah, that's it for me.
Awesome. Next one. What's
Nice.
Zone 5 be included in my cycling training, and what race situation will it benefit?
The next slide. All right, so let's just visit zone 5 for cycling. So it is high intensity. However, it's between like 3 and 8 minutes worth of effort. So the guys have been doing quite a lot of cycling with us on Zwift, have been enduring quite a lot of power training. It is super tough, and it needs to be, in my opinion, needs to be included in every cyclist needs to have zone 5 training to some extent in their year schedule. If you look at it from a planning perspective, if you're a road racer or a hill climber or whatever you are, you still need to have it in there, and it needs to match the demands of what you're doing. So if you think about, for example, Mr. Sagan here on the Poggio, this is a race called Milan-San Remo, and he basically rode for 7 hours. It's like 250k or some mad distance like that. And there's a little arrow pointed to the guy 2 bikes back. He's called Mikhail Kwiatkowski. There you go. Thanks for the highlight there, Tom. Basically, most road races are decided in sometimes a 30-second or sometimes like a 5-minute period. This Poggio, this is like a 6-minute hill, and it usually decides the whole race. So let me just throw some statistics at you. In this race, Kwiatkowski released his power data. So he put out 166 watts on average for that 7 hours. Okay, you might be sitting there thinking, that's all right. But for him, that's nothing. That's literally, his FTP is probably around the 350, 400 mark. So it's literally, that's soft pedaling for the entire time. That's like a zone 1 recovery ride. However, in that Poggio, which is, I think it took him about 8 minutes, his watts were 433. So in a cycling world, zone 5 and being able to put out a number of watts for 3 to 8 minutes is essential. Look at any race. Look at Chris Froome attacking on the Von 2. Look at Kwiatkowski here, keeping up with Sagan and eventually normalizing 300 watts for the last 2 minutes and sprinting at 1200 watts. This sort of power zone makes and breaks races. So if you're a road racer, super, super important. If you skip to the next slide, Tom. So how often? Your body can handle 2 or 3 sessions a week. But again, as I said just before, we need to think about where it lies in your training and at what time of the year it actually comes into it. So have a look at the demands of the race. There's a great story about Vincenzo Nibali, who, when trained to beat Chris Froome up hills, he would do zone 5 training, but his coach would just record how long Chris Froome attacked for. So up to 2 minutes of the big surge, or 3 minutes. And then what basically Nibali would do was repeat the efforts in exact, like just as if he's responding to the attacks. So it's real race specific. So if you've got a rolling course or a 100k road race and it's got 3 5-minute hills, you can pretty much guarantee that the race is going to come down to those 3 5-minute hills. So training your VO2 max or zone 5 training and repeated efforts between that, like that 4 to 6 minutes, is probably going to do you a lot of good. So yeah, 2 or 3 sessions a week, but like we've been saying throughout this, it's super, super important to rest between these, and the rest between each effort is also pretty important. And is it a weakness? So For me, zone 5 probably is a weakness. I haven't got that much power. My VO2 max and my anaerobic capacity when you go top end isn't super high. So on a long steady climb, I can average quite a lot of watts, but the big punches, so the Tour for All had in stage 3 had a lot of like little punches around New York, and that really killed me. My legs couldn't handle it and recover. So efficiency in zone 5 is really important. So if it is a weakness, do your power curve analysis and work on that. Next slide. So just a little summary. Zone 5 for training for cyclists is really, really important. It defines success in basically most races, not GC necessarily, but one-day races in early spring, what we didn't have this year, in moderation and closer to your race. So as you move through the season, so you get your base sorted, you start to build up, you build tolerance at zone 4, you move up to zone 5 as you approach your race to mimic the exact conditions of those attacks and what you expect them to be. Anything above 106%, high RPM typically, and lots of zone 2 recovery. It can take about up to 72 hours sometimes to recover fully from a zone 5 session. Just another little thing, there's a old Friel was going on about when and how many intervals should I do for zone 5. He surmises that after your third effort, if you take your average power, so say you're doing 3-minute efforts, if you're knocking out 115%, what you need to do is take around about 5% off that and then repeat until exhaustion. The jury's out on that, but it's a pretty good thing. So if you're looking for how many efforts you should do within zone 5, that's rule of thumb is pretty much good to go to. 9% if it goes up to 8 minutes or 10 minutes. So you take your third effort, take 5% off, ta-da, you've got your exhaustion efforts. Yeah, I think that's about me done.
Beauty. Let's have a look at the chat for questions.
I think we've got some.
Walker, going back to the study, I have a question about the study.
Yes.
So I take it then the 6-second efforts, they measured that just with effort level.
They put something like 7. Let me have a look. It was 7.5% of body weight as resistance on one of these Monarch exercise bikes. So basically you're pushing out, if you're doing, say, 3 watts per kilo, then they add on 7.5% of your body weight to hit the same watts per kilo. So you have to produce a lot more watts to hit the same watts per kilo.
Got you.
Yeah, so it's real maximal intent. So question from Johan. Rob, I think you can answer this one. If you're scheduled for a zone 1 recovery run and your heart rate does not play game and is higher, should you just walk?
Yes. Sorry, I'll elaborate on that a little bit. If your heart rate's not playing game and it's going higher, then you're not in zone 1. You're pushing into zone 2. Now, gotta think the recovery run is to promote blood flow, but you're not wanting the impact stress. Well, it depends. You're looking for recovery, but you're not looking for as much impact stress. So if your heart rate's going too high, it's not recovery. I would walk or just stop and go home and do some mobility work instead, because you clearly need the rest. If your heart rate's jacked up nice and high, it's already stressed if your pace is that low already. So maybe you've not slept, maybe you're dehydrated, maybe you're not recovered from the session the previous day. There could be lots of factors that are affecting why your heart rate is so high on this day at that pace. So again, it comes down to self-awareness as well. How do you feel? If you're not feeling great, or if you're feeling tired, or you're feeling dehydrated, then you probably are, and you should bin the session. It's fine. You'll make better gains in the long run than pushing through it.
Yeah. Also, there's a few factors to recovery, so you need to understand what you are actually recovering. If your session says go out for an easy an easy run, we just want to stimulate blood flow and get some low level adaptations in terms of tendons and joint strength, then there's no mention of heart rate there. So just keep it really, really easy and go. If it says go out and stick the heart rate zone 1 and your heart rate flies up, then you need to pull back and walk and keep it easy. But the coach will give you recovery sessions based on what they want you to get recovered with. Like sometimes it's like, just go for a 30-minute run and relax. Well, that's because mentally we want you to just have some downtime, get some time out, recover in that sense. So read your session, understand what the point of the session is. If it's not clear, ask, and then go and execute. But if there's a heart rate parameter, it's there for a reason. And if you need to walk, you need to walk.
I would add into this as well. Like we can guess how you might feel after some sessions, but we're not mind readers and we can't necessarily predict the future. So if it comes to Wednesday and you've done a banging track Tuesday session and you feel fried, you don't necessarily have to run. If you feel fried and you need that recovery, please take it. There's no point, Training Peaks says I have to do this. Lovely, but recovery might be more important. So use some common sense.
Yeah. Matani says zone 5 training should be 10% of the total training volume in a week. As a question. No, not necessarily. It's all about where you are in time season. So that's not a general rule at all. In terms of like your base phase, you might never do zone 5. And then as you build, so you're going through a second phase of base, you might add some in. Certainly within your build and peak, you will have some zone 5 work, but it's not necessarily going to be 10%. That is because it's so hard. So when you're, as we've talked about, the adaptations, but also the issues that zone 5 can bring to you, if you had it in your training all season round, you'd likely end up injured. So it's very much, it depends. And that's also, it depends on the level of athlete that you are, your training age, chronological age, a lot of different varieties will come into play there. Anyone else got anything to add in on that?
No, I think you said it there, to be honest.
Sweet.
It's all person specific.
Pops, is there a screen on Training Peaks where you can see the % of your entire week by zone? Yes. In dashboard, I'm not sure if you get it. We get it as coaches' accounts, but you can go into your dashboard and you can select time in zones from run, bike, swim. You can do it on pace. You can do it on heart rate. It's all in there, and then you can see a nice graph of where you are.
I've actually just sent it to you.
There you go.
Look at that efficiency.
And actually a decent question from the boss. I'm not sure if he's joking or not, but impact of mask on zone 5. Actually, there is one. Like if you're struggling, if it's costing you more to get oxygen in while you're running or cycling, then your heart rate is going to go up because it needs to pump more to get the same amount of oxygen around the body in terms of feeding the muscles. So yeah, you will get through your zones, you'll ramp up faster if you're going to exhaustion through wearing a mask. And actually on occasion, if you're not fit enough to push yourself really hard, you won't reach your maximal zones with a mask in the way because it's slowing down the amount of oxygen you can pull in.
Also, your respiratory muscles have to work a little bit harder.
Yeah.
So it'll jack up even quicker.
Tom, would you say that is also relevant for zone 1 as well? We had the question about trying to stay in zone 1. When you go for a zone 1 run, obviously if you've got that mask on, you may creep up into zone 2. So we might all find at the moment that we actually do need to walk for zone 1.
Yeah, and it's hot as well, right? You've got to think of the heat.
Mm.
Got to think of the heat thing as well. Cloth v surgical, big debate. No clear evidence on cloth. Surgical works, but not in the real world. Captain, is that mask effect similar to decrease in performance heat? Yeah. Yeah, very similar. Same with altitude, heat, cold, masks, anything that's causing an outside stress will affect heart rate zones as well. That's the main of all of this heart rate zone sort of talk, although we're talking about pace as well and power. It's all down to how your equipment is measuring you. So you need to take all of this with the assumption that your heart rate monitor, your power meter, your GPS watch is calibrated to be accurate. And so if it doesn't feel like, we've gone through these zones and we've given you a feeling of what it should be. If you're in a zone and it doesn't feel right, it's probably not. So zone 1 recovery should feel like a walk in the park. If it doesn't, then you're not recovering. Zone 2, as we said, should feel very comfortable. If it's not, then you're probably not in zone 2. Zone 3, comfortably hard. We know how that feels. Most people love that zone 3 feeling. Zone 4, you're now into hard, and zone 5, you're into maximal. So it's all about matching up the feeling with the parameters set that we've given out, which during summertime in Dubai is so important to be aware of.
And not to stress when your heart rate reading or your power reading's not telling you what you think it should or what you feel it should. Just to reiterate what Tom said, we've been talking about the feel of exercise and how you should always relate the numbers to a sensation. So when something does like go out of sync, you can rely on your perception as opposed to possibly faulty equipment or it absolutely roasting outside. My heart rate's in zone 5 constantly when I walk outside. I just point blank ignore it and go on my feel.
It's because you're a hummingbird.
This is true. Absolutely true. Fact.
Yeah, Miranda, if you're weak, then the Planck complex will trigger zone 5 heart rate response. There you go. We'll be able to know if you get better or not because it'll feel less hard.
The Planck complex.
Measure.
Love it. Maxing out.
Well, we are 20 minutes past what people say they want their Zoom chats to be right now. So any more questions, please get them in. If not, it's 3 minutes to 8. You guys can go start your day. And we'll be back next week. Episode 10.
Holy moly.
Holy moly.
That's it. Thanks, guys. Sorry about the presentation.
Thank
Right,
you.
let's complete the Zoom.
Hey guys.
Ciao.
Thank you.
Ciao. Ciao, 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 ciao.
I don't know.
George is gone.
Eesh.
I don't get why my Zoom is playing ball one week and not the next.
What
It's
was
weird,
happening?
So I go on to share and it shows the first screen, but when I click to the next, it doesn't show it.
Ah, okay. So try this. So when you share it, are you clicked on the Zoom or you clicked on the presentation?
I click on the presentation.
Ah, okay, that's fine then.
Yeah.
I thought,
So I
thought a wizard.
No, because
Share.
I've done that. Yeah, I've done that before.
I go to play it
Yeah.
and then it says sharing is paused. Bring your shared window to the front.
Yeah.
Maybe it's a screen selection.
Maybe
So
you need to close something else. Maybe you got the chat window, the Zoom chat up or something like that.
Nah, it's not that.
Maybe
weird,
so close that one down. Because that one keeps popping up. Mine's at the front. Close those.
Get rid of all of them.
Now try.
There you go.
There you go. Oh, that would have been nice.
Oh, lovely.
All
Quick,
right.
guys, come back.
Do it again. All right, well, that answers that. That's fucking weird, isn't it?
Basic
go.
technology in it.
Studies.
Cool. Right. Happy.
Sweet. All right, boys. Good job.
Good lie down again.
Back to bed, isn't it?
Fuck yeah. See what's going on in the. Hannah decided. There she is.
Ah,
Ooh.
filmings.
This is like when my mum sends me pictures of a bird that she's got a camera in a bird box infrared.
My mum does that with in the garden in their vegetable patch, and it's like deers and badgers and things. And she
Oh,
sends
that's
me
cool.
videos like, why do I care that there's a badger eating an old carrot at 3 a.m.? I don't. Makes her happy though, so that's fine.
Honey badger, that's when you catch on camera.
Fucking honey badgers, you watch yourself.
I've got a picture of a honey badger sniffing around my fucking tent in Africa.
I'm glad it was only a 10.
Aye, little
Thank-
bastards.
Not a nice way.
Fucking crazy.
See you later.
Bye.
All right, see you.